I think we all know that the computerized projections on what's going to happen to the climate can result in widely varying results 10, 15, 20, 50 years out if there is almost an infinitesimal change in the data which is put into the computer. Now, since 2000, according to Dr. Green's paper, which I believe to be scientifically valid, it has determined that the rate of our planet's warming has flattened out or begun to decline. And as a result, what was being talked about at the time of Kyoto, before this flattening out of the temperatures or slight declining of the temperatures, will probably be significantly different by 2020, 2030, and definitely by 2050. When we're talking about resiliency and adaptation, if the premises upon which decisions are to be made are off and will result in the wide variation in what the projections will be, how do we do it? And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Seidel.
Thank you, Mr. Sensenbrenner. You know, basically, we are seeing this experiment unfold before our very eyes. We've seen temperatures rise, we've seen sea level rise, we've seen the loss of islands in Maryland. So, you know, we're not just basing this on projections of computer models. The second point you raised is about the recent changes, the recent sort of flattening out of the temperature record since the year 2000. And, you know, every analysis I've seen expects that there's still natural variability in the climate system. There will be years that are warmer, there will be years that are colder. And, you know, the last couple of years have been relatively warm compared to the record. In fact, last year was the coldest year of this century, but the 10th warmest year, I believe, in the 150-year record. This decade, which you're referring to as climate has stabilized, will still be the warmest decade among the 150-year record.
Well, using the language of the left, I think, Mr. Seidel, that answer makes you a denier. Because if you look at the trends, there has been at least flattening out of the warming trend, or maybe a slight cooling trend, since the year 2000. And I guess what I'm saying is that the inconvenient truth of 2 years ago might not be either inconvenient or truthful today because of these types of changes. Now, what we're talking about here is an adaptation policy that is supposed to last for a while, and there will be certain economic and financial commitments that will have to be made in order to implement the adaptation policy. Given the fact that the projections of a decade ago that the temperatures will continue to rise and maybe even increase, how as policymakers are we to be able to decide in a manner that we won't be embarrassed later on by saying we were wrong in what the prescription was to deal with this issue?
In terms of adaptation itself, I think it's critical that the types of changes that we can make to our economic systems that are dependent on climate will create benefits. And those benefits are true whether there's rapid climate change, as the vast majority of scientists predict, or because of the climate variability, as my colleague here would suggest.
But, you know, with all due respect, what I'm saying is that, you know, you all are saying we ought to adapt, but you, Mr. Seidel, aren't adapting to new figures. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired.